We live in a culture that fabricates and mass-produces images for the almost singular purpose of self-promotion. We are in control of our own identity and how the world sees us. At the very core of this creation and manipulation of the self is Cindy Sherman and her Untitled Stills. This series is a collection of 69 black and white photographs through which Cindy created as many identities as she did images. Cindy used clothing, wigs, and makeup to create a range of female personae, which she then photographed in her loft or the streets of New York, in apparently solitary, unguarded moments of reflection, undress, or in conversation with somebody offset and outside of the frame. If we look at this series as a process of discovery, one can argue that the stills were a means to manufacture identities. In these, we never see the real identity, only the character she creates. The key aspect of how Cindy works is the fact that she uses a mirror next to her camera to check her reflection before she takes the photograph. The mirror offers the possibility of carefully curating this performance alongside the assembly of the identities. Looking back in history, mirrors were often used as devices for artists to insert themselves in their work and also to insert lies in history. In Vermeer's music lesson, for example, we see in the mirror what looks like the painter's easel and foot. The mirror is used as a prop to extend the image and show a literal reflection of the room where the painter is working. However, in Velázquez Las Meninas, he deliberately inserted himself in the picture and used the mirror to reveal what is behind us outside of the frame. That mirror could never reflect that image. It is a lie. So even though Cindy's use of the mirror is not revealed in the final image, it is the device through which she constructs multiple identities. However, today the mirror has been replaced with screens, mostly the ones on our phones, to curate our self, the world around us, and to architecture. We can imagine the narrative behind that photograph and speculate on what is outside of the frame. This ambiguity in the narrative of the image is further enhanced by the lack of titles. The image is not telling a truth, but evoking an undefined yet familiar narrative. These moving stills reveal the moment just before and just after the image. They reveal no new context or add to the implied narrative, just the moment of the image production. The moment when the picture is taken captures only a part of the subject. It flattens it and freezes it into one single frame. Accepting that one single image as the identity is like laying out the factory and not switching on the machines. Architecture's obsession with its own image is not new. Since the invention of photography, the medium and architecture have been playing catch-up with each other. We have been constantly manipulating architecture to be the most perfect version of itself. One could argue that modern architecture was the first to use photography as a means to construct a perfect image as an identity and to market itself. The simpler geometry and monochromatic scheme ensure that modernist buildings became every photographer's dream. The architecture suited the medium of photography more than itself. More importantly, the photographs portrayed an architecture that was stripped of its people. In one simple click, the architect-photographer became the new maker of a world that rejected a man as the center of the universe and gave its place to the architecture. If there were people, as in some of Julius Schauman's photographs, they were carefully staged and curated to fit the fiction created by the image. As Guy Debord once noted, everything that once lived has become representation, and so has architecture, which has become a collection of images that presents only a fragmented view of reality. However, if in Debord's society of spectacle everyone was watching the same show, now, it seems, we are only looking back at ourselves. We have fallen down the rabbit hole, and Wonderland certainly looks wonderful. Or does it? When we only refer to ourselves, how can we possibly evolve? we are no longer concerned with making place. Instead, we make an image of a place. We have removed ourselves from space and place. Architecture has become disembodied from its primary site. It is a sad indictment of our contemporary cultural sense of identity that Kim Kardashian's Selfish book is arguably an updated version of Sherman's Untitled Stills. One crucial distinction between Kim and Cindy's forms of production lie in the quantity of image output. While Cindy often only took one shot per character, Kim churns out endless self-similar self-portraits of the same character. The images become a self-fulfilling prophecy because her days are almost entirely defined by the making and taking of the images. The obsession with the selfie is important to address. Just like the Narcissus myth, the action of looking at oneself on a flat surface that now allows you to edit that reflection, it brings up an important question in relation to the way we portray architecture. That is, do we Photoshop or do we operate? The image factory does neither. It stands in the line between the constructed and the perceived space. It explores the possibility of editing space in the real world. It is a real-life Photoshop. It proposes a set of new optical tools that embed the post-production process within its structure. Designed to be seen as both a real space and as the photograph that it creates, it ultimately produces an image that matches the reality portrayed. This factory puts such tools in practice, namely the erasing tool, where I designed and placed an optical system that exaggerates slimness, verticality, and even erases the factory primary heavy structure. It is important to detach the production of architecture from the photographic medium so space can stand still on its own. For this, the invention of real editing tools becomes essential to produce an architecture of real spatial inhabitation. The materiality of this space is ephemeral and almost invisible, so we can fill it up with our own worlds. However, the factory's editing tool brings out an inherent contradiction that we can't ignore. The mass production of images of the same object ultimately erases the meaning of the subject, and the factory becomes a self-storage for its own multiple identities. It becomes an assembly line of the making and consumption of the same image over and over again. Architecture becomes a déjà vu. As architects today, we sit in a cultural ground between nostalgia and anticipation. The infinite amount of images produced by the factory is entombed in the self-storage unit. And this needs to change. We need to obliterate the archive and instead transform the way we conceive of, describe, and understand identity. We need to inhabit the worlds we are building. If the image allowed us to dream and to aim beyond the laws of physics, we now must gather the courage and build them for real.